Hi everybody, my name is Nathan. I am going to take you through, this is my very first live stream on Facebook and I'm very excited to do it. I'm going to start calling it Nightcaps with Nate. It's basically going to air most nights at 9 p.m. Some nights I might not be able to do it because I might be nightcapping somewhere else with the wife. But when I'm home, this is what I plan on doing. Basically going over the current events of the day and things that are exciting news, things that piss me off, media bias, whatever. If you have a topic that you want to discuss, let me know because I have people all across the world that I can interview. For instance, if you want to talk about immigration, I have friends that are here both legally and illegally, and we will actually do a honest and fair interview. So all you gotta do is hit me up on Facebook, send me a message, and we can possibly do at least a segment of one of my shows on that topic. So let's get started for today. Today, I really want to talk. We know what the issue of the day right now is coronavirus. And I really want to go over some of the real numbers. Right now, you're seeing a lot of crap headlines saying that the United States is taking over #1 in the world and all that. And that is true. When it comes to hardcore numbers, when it comes to the actual cases, let me pull this up here real quick. We are looking at numbers that are pretty scary. Okay, so I'm going to go to just total cases. And if you look at total cases, the United States does lead the world. We have 123,311 total cases at the moment. However, it's kind of misleading because we're a large country. We're larger than Italy. Italy, as you can see, has 92,472. But if you look over here at deaths per million, total cases per million, they have 1,529 cases per million, whereas we're only at 373. Now, I don't mean to minimize that. Like, every case is scary, every death is tragic, but let's resort this. If you resort this, this is where the media pisses me off. In this case, they're not trying to be biased like towards Trump, and we'll get into media bias a little bit later. What they're trying to do is garner headlines. It's sensational journalism. It's so you will click on their link or buy their newspaper or their magazine. But if you really look at it, #1 is actually Vatican City. Now they're a small little country. They shouldn't. It's debatable if they even should be a country, but they are. If they had 1 million people, it would equal 7,491 cases per million. All right, and if you look all the way down, where is the United States? Really, we're behind Luxembourg, Iceland, Switzerland, Spain, Italy. In fact, Italy, which has the second most, is really, as you can count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9 or 10th on the list in cases per million. And we're all the way down to number 30. Okay? So when you see sensational headlines, I like to look past them and do some real data. Never, ever, ever trust just the news. Even good news outlets that maybe a little bit left of center, like NPR, that tends to go a little deeper, a little less fake, as President Trump would call them, they will sometimes still do some sensationalism there, or they bite on the bullet of the sensationalism from the Washington Post or New York Times. But really, in all actuality, we're actually 30th in the world with about 373 cases per million. All right. Now, a lot of people will say, hey, that's because we're not testing enough people, and that could be true. Maybe some countries are testing more, and that's why they have a higher number. Maybe the Vatican has tested everybody, and that's why they're the highest number. So, unfortunately, the only real gauge, because this is so new and novel, is for us really to look at the deaths per million. And deaths per million, it looks like a little small country called San Marino is actually #1. They have 648 deaths per million people. And Italy is actually the second, which is sad at 166. If you look where we're at, we're actually tied for number 17th down here. And this has moved because yesterday we were tied for 20th. So it's kind of a little scary. It is going up exponentially. So when they're telling you, hey, stay home, you idiot, make sure that you actually do stay home. It's actually probably pretty good advice. Am I guilty? Yeah. My wife and I, we went to Target today. We got so stir crazy, we actually went to Target. But we made sure we kept our social distancing. Target's doing a really good job. By the way, if you have to do shopping, go to Target because Target is actually cleaning everything. Walmart says they are, and I believe they may be trying, but Walmart is a little different targeted demographic, I should say, and so they're they're more about volume. And when we went to Walmart today, for the very few seconds that we went in, it was pretty crowded. In fact, it kind of gave me a little bit of the EBGBs because there are so many people there, and it's kind of hard to keep your social distance. Not just that, I mean, what good is social distancing anyways if you're going to walk through somebody else's previously breathed space? I did notice though that the clientele of Walmart actually they do wear more masks and gloves, but they kind of just do it wrong. My wife, who works in the VA medical center, she and I were laughing because there would be people with surgical masks on, but then they only covered their mouth and not their nose, and we're like, that defeats the whole purpose. Or they're wearing it inside out. Or they're just wearing gloves and they're touching everything, but then they use their glove to wipe their eye, which kind of just defeats the purpose. But Target, I do give them props. They are doing a really good job when it comes to cleaning their stuff. If you touch their keypad, as soon as you're done, they have people on hand that do nothing but disinfect the keypads for the next customer. They wipe down all their carts meticulously. The store is cleaner than I've ever seen it in my life, and I think it's kudos to Target. So, so going on to that, keep your social distancing. I do agree, but kind of keep it within reason. Cities like New York City, they're getting a lot more cases because they're all on top of each other. Same with Italy. If you've ever been to Italy, not a lot of people have their own single houses like we do in the United States. And so that's why our big cities are clustered. That's why we're getting a lot more cases in the bigger cities. In fact, I kind of want to click over here to the USA, same website. Let me bring this up over here. And if you look, these numbers were as of last night, and they'll update probably in the next couple hours. But if you look at the numbers that are actually highest, New York City, followed by New York, followed by New Jersey. And what's crazy about New York is that 50%, they make up 40% of the country's cases, but 50% of their cases are all in New York City. And so it's really a bad situation there. And there's not a lot that you can do there's not a whole lot that you can do to mitigate it. When you're living on top of each other, it's hard. You go out for a walk in the city, even though more people are staying home, the city really is hard to social distance yourself from that many people. And like I said, that's what's going on. If you look at New Jersey, they're second, California, and then Michigan. Michigan is I don't get it. Yeah, Detroit's a big city, but Michigan being number 4 in the country for cases is and most of the cases are clustered around Detroit. Michigan is outside of Detroit in the thumb region, is really kind of a country state. It's not really that big of a state. It's pretty socially distanced anyways. A lot of cornfields, and then you get up to the north and you get a lot of trees and stuff. But for them to have the 4th amount in the country, that's really surprising to me. I thought it would be other more populated states than Michigan. If you go down, it was West Virginia at the end, but now we're at 113. I say we because I actually live slightly in West Virginia. I am in the D.C. metro area, but we were actually proud to be the very last state to have any cases. As you can see, it's gone up considerably. The number that scares me is that I remember when we first started having our first deaths, and those were in Washington State with that old folks home, and I was hoping that it would be confined to that area. And then it went up to 16. Well, if you look at this number here, in the last 24 hours, 515 people have died in this thing. So, is that a lot? Well, it is, because it's growing. It's doubling about every 2 or 3 days, that number. So in 2 or 3 days, you might see 1,000 people who die in a day. 2 or 3 days after that, you might see 2,000 or 3,000 people that die in a day. And that is scary. I mean, it's exponentially scary. Now, I'm hoping that with some of these drugs that are coming on the market, that we could possibly see where we don't have to sparingly use the ventilators, and we don't have to worry about people clogging up the ERs and all that stuff. with that being said, there are some good drugs that are coming out, and I don't get it because Governor Cuomo had to be forced to allow hydroxychloroquine to be used. And yes, we shouldn't be allowing any hoarding. But if you have a person who can be saved off the ventilator, because we know that there's such a shortage of ventilators, especially in New York, by doing a cocktail of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, then that might be a promising thing. But what's happening is this is where politics are coming in. It pisses me the hell off. Just pisses me off. You have people like Cuomo and really Governor Whitmer of Michigan, and like we said, she has the 4th highest amount of cases, and they're basically threatening medical practitioners that if they use hydroxychloroquine and Z-Pak, which is a cocktail that's been shown some promise, that they'll be referred to for administrative action, which could really mean pharmacists and doctors losing their license. And that's kind of surprising to me, because whatever happened to the idea that Democrats are all about abortion rights and not getting in between a patient and their doctor and all that stuff? Well, that's exactly what they're doing. They're doing it for political gain. Mark my words, they're doing it for political gain. Actually, they're not even doing it for gain. They're doing it just to hurt the President of the United States, because the President of the United States came out and said, hey, what about hydroxychloroquine and Z-Pak? Looks very promising. And then all of a sudden, all these Democrat governors are like, oh, no, you can't use it because we're studying it. Studying it? We don't have time to study it. What are we studying here? People are dying. That's why it's called the novel coronavirus. It's absolutely retarded that they are studying it. And forget my word, I apologize if some people get offended by some of the language I use, but it's actually stupid to sit there and study a potential cure when people are dying and we're running out of ventilators. I wish that they would quit it. Hopefully the Food and Drug Administration will come out and approve it right away and override maybe these governors. And I'm a states' right guy, but we're in an emergency here. And if people are playing politics, then that's just wrong. Other promising treatments that are out there, remdesivir, it's an antiviral that they're trying out. But I wonder though, is the big pharma lobby, are they in on this? Why? Because hydroxychloroquine and Z-Paks are cheap. And I'm not sure if azithromycin is on the generic list yet, but I know hydroxychloroquine is. It's been a malaria drug that's been used for 50 years now. And it's really cheap. It's generic. And the big pharma, well, this is their opportunity to make a lot of money. You know, they come out with a new cure for this thing, and they can scare governors and politicians away from using that, then they get to charge you a lot more. Okay? And the politicians don't ever think that they really care. Trump, I think, does care. I think that's why he puts his foot in his mouth a lot. I love Trump when it comes to policy for the most part, but he does like to put his foot in his mouth with his stupid tweets and stuff. But, he's not the typical politician. So he's thinking practically, hey, hydroxychloroquine, hey, let's get this going. Let's save these ventilators for people that can't use it. For instance, people that have heart conditions cannot use hydroxychloroquine. I'm not a doctor, so that's my disclaimer, but I do read a lot of the news. And so they can't use hydroxychloroquine. Those are the people that if they get COVID-19, they need to be on the ventilators. If we can steer ahead like this New York doctor did, this Hasidic doctor, and another doctor that I was reading about, over 100 patients, and not one of them have died. And the reason why is because as soon as he even suspects that this person has COVID-19, he's throwing them on the hydroxychloroquine and the Z-Pak, and he adds vitamin C to it, and he hasn't had one patient have to be admitted to the hospital and use one of those ventilators. It just bothers the hell out of me when people play politics and it costs people their lives. So, what's the point there? Use the damn drug. It's there. It's working. Until we get something better, let's study it while we use it. Okay? Let's not play politics. Let's remove the red tape, and that's where President Trump has done an amazing job. Is he's gotten the FDA to work a lot quicker, and the CDC. Let's test more people, but in the meantime, a lot of doctors, they can tell now off just the scans of the lungs. It's called a crystallized lung scan of pneumonia, and they can pretty much diagnose it that way. And if they're starting to get to that point, let's give them the drugs. And Governor Whitmer any of those other people, I doubt you're watching, but if you are, stay the hell out of the way. Get out of the way. And if you're voting for one of these crooked-ass politicians that do that, I honestly think that you should rethink your vote. And that goes for the right and the left, okay? And at election time, don't forget these things, okay? I know we're in a 24-hour news cycle, and new news happens so fast, but man, when it comes to election time, vote. 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 And don't just vote party. For instance, this last election, my wife and I, we voted for a Democrat, Senator Manchin, and for Senator of West Virginia. I'm kind of regretting it here and there, especially with the impeachment vote and all that. But, you know, we saw him as a person who's trying. Governor Jim Justice of West Virginia, he was a Democrat, and he switched over to the Republican Party. That doesn't mean he automatically gets our vote. You know, there's things that he's kind of a little shaky on, and maybe there's another better politician. So don't just vote straight party. It's just stupid. It's a waste of your vote. All right, so every day I want to go over what I call the media bias of the day. Now, one thing you're going to learn about media bias is that media bias is not always right there in your face. Media bias could be just what they choose to report and what they don't choose to report. And this is a perfect example, because if this were President Trump, or let's just use Marco Rubio back in the day when he was running, or Ted Cruz or whatever, if they were running for president and they became the major de facto gonna be the candidate for the party, you know full well the media would not be so silent on a sexual assault accuser. Heck, even Trump, who kind of got away with it, and his was more sexual harassment, more consensual, but he didn't even get away with it. Okay, the media beat him up. In fact, when he was caught on the bus saying, I'm going to grab the pussy or whatever, we grab him by the pussy and they allow me to do it, you know, that right there, yeah, it was intolerable, and a lot of people thought, hey, the election's over, and rightly so. The media hounded him over unproven accusations with the porn star and all that. And we all knew Trump wasn't a stand-up guy. But here's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, in this Me Too age, has a lady named, I think it's Tara Reid. Yeah, Tara Reid here accuses Joe Biden of inappropriate behavior when she worked at his Senate office in 1993. Now she's accusing the Democrat presidential nominee of actual sexual assault, which is a felony, according to a graphic interview with podcaster Katie Halper. And very few news outlets have actually caught on to this. Has actually reported on it. CNN, a group called Hot Air, they actually checked. I hate their name Hot Air because it actually takes away their credibility. But they actually checked. CNN has not mentioned it one time. It hasn't been on any front page news. In fact, only, and to their credit, these are left-leaning, and they're only doing it because they love Bernie Sanders, but their left-leaning news organizations have brought it up. Huffington Post and Vox. Okay? And if this were anybody else, if this was somebody on the right, I tell you straight up that this would be all over the news. And that is a perfect example of media bias. Media bias is not only how they report it. In other words, it's not only the headline. It's also what they choose to report and where they choose to report it at. Is it the leading story on a news program? In a newspaper, if you still read those, is it page 1 or is it way back on page D19? Is it a whole expose or is it just a few paragraphs? Is it on your web only and not in your hard print? Okay? Media bias is more than just how they're reporting it. It's what they're reporting and when and how much oomph or veracity they're putting behind it. And I guarantee you, and it's shown time after time, I guarantee you that if this were a Republican, this would be everywhere. If this was a major Republican candidate, this would be everywhere. It would be top of the news. CNN would have the Chiron or whatever they call that thing, and it would just constantly be top of the mind for all these news outlets. But because it's a Democrat and it's Joe Biden, they're given a free pass. Just like they they would report. This is another example of the different type of media bias, with Hillary and her email server. They would report about it, but then they would always kind of soften it. They'd always soften the blow. Okay? And I'll give you some examples of other media bias. Some of the headlines. CNN's the worst ever since 2016. You know, so-and-so eviscerates Trump. That's a key word, eviscerates. Okay? Trump caught in 5 different lies and missteps. 5 ways Trump has misled the American people on coronavirus. Those kind of things. Okay? But you never see that when it comes to Democrats. And that's why some political science say that Republicans are already at a 10-point disadvantage in the polls. In other words, if a Republican wins the popular vote of any election, any major election, typically they are basically beating their opponent plus 10 extra points to make up for the media bias. So if they win by 51%, really, had the media been fair, they would have won by at 61%. And that we can debate that all you want. But if you don't think that there is a media bias against the GOP or conservatives, you're crazy, in my opinion. And by all means, I will have you on my podcast if you want to disagree with me, and we can go fact by fact. All right, so this brings me to my final point of the night. Will Joe Biden survive? Assuming that the reason why nobody has reported on this, has made this a big deal, is because of this coronavirus. The coronavirus is going to pass in the next 2 to 4 weeks, in my opinion, and this may come out. And if he doesn't survive because of this, he's not going to survive, because I'm telling you, the guy's got dementia. In fact, I've renamed him Dementia Joe. Joe Biden is not all there. When Joe Biden first was going to run for president, I was scared. I ain't going to freaking lie. I was a little bit worried, because I like Trump's policies. And Trump kind of puts his foot in his mouth. And Joe Biden used to be a sharp kind of guy. Always put his foot in his mouth, but never, ever so bad that the media would totally beat him up. And again, he does get a free pass. Okay? When Joe Biden made his remarks about he can't go to a 7-Eleven without sounding Indian, that's a perfect example of a pass that he got, okay? You can read old stories back in 2006, like the top 10 Joe Biden gaffes, where Time Magazine actually went over them. But they're usually outside of an election, and they're usually not well shown. I'm going to see if possibly you guys can hear this, but let me pull this thing up here. Here's a great example of a good Joe Biden gaffe.
Manish, how are you, man? Well, good to see you. As you know, I got a lot of support from you, Cindy.
That's where, and more to come, I think.
Yeah,
so.
No, I've had a great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
My God. Could you imagine if anybody else said that stuff? And now, not only does he make stupid gaffes like that, and he's kind of creepy and kisses on people, but the guy forgets where he is half the time. And I think the Democrat establishment is worried. They were scared to death of Bernie Sanders because he's a socialist, and they rightfully should have been, because they wouldn't have won the election. But they had a better chance winning with Bernie Sanders than they do with Joe Biden. But I do not think that is where this election is going to go. I think we're going to go to a brokered convention, and this guy here is going to win, because he's getting glowing headlines all over. Even though he has been known, and his brother, who is a CNN anchor, has been known to put their foot in the mouth. But if you look at some of the headlines that Andrew Cuomo's getting, he is the point man that the Democrats are in love with right now to take on Trump. And he's sharp. Unlike Joe Biden, who's kind of lost his marbles, he's a pretty sharp guy. But Governor Cuomo is getting high marks from the press and from his constituents on how he's handling this COVID crisis in the state of New York, which we just saw has the most cases in the United States. Okay? So, if you look, I didn't even know this. I just now saw this headline. Tucker Carlson, who I do like. I do respect him a lot. Biden won't be the Democrat nominee. Andrew Cuomo most likely will. Tucker Carlson says he believes Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee on Election Day, with the Fox News host offering New York Andrew Cuomo as a candidate to take on President Trump. He says, quote, well, in the math doesn't work, but it's not about the math. It's about will. The conservative Carlson said during Charlie LaDuff's podcast.
Does joint discomfort have you feeling tied down? Stuck?
He says, well, the math doesn't work, but it's not about the math. It's about the will. No BS News Hour is what he was on when asked about how the delicate math would work with the former vice president out in front of Senator Bernie Sanders. So the Democrat Party is intent on taking power, period, and they mean it, and they are willing to do kind of whatever they think will work. We saw this in the last election when Bernie Sanders was taking on candidate Clinton. We saw where they brought in the superdelegates, and they were going to make sure that there was no way, no chance in hell that Bernie Sanders was going to win. And that's exactly what they're going to do. Mark my words, it is March 28, 2020. If Biden is not the nominee, it will be Andrew Cuomo and his running mate, who I think is already posturing for it. We know they're probably going to pick a female, maybe the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. I think that's her name. Governor Whitmer. That'll be good for Michigan because hopefully Michigan will wake back up and reelect a good conservative like Governor Snyder was. Yes, Snyder messed up with Flint, Michigan, but overall he's been a good governor. Michigan, y'all suck, and that's my home state. If you look behind me, I had the good old Detroit Lions hat. I am a 100 tried and true 100% Detroit Lions fan, even though they piss me off year after year. But you know who else pisses me off? You voters of Michigan. And that's my home state. I come from Flint, Michigan. What are you thinking? I remember back when Blanchard was in charge. Economy was going into shambles. Deficits were way up. And then a guy named Engler came in and saved the day. Engler leaves. We foolishly, not me, but they, foolishly elect Jennifer Granholm. And if you look at Granholm's record, Michigan was in a one-state recession long before the Great Recession took place. And yes, that is partly Bush and the Democrats' fault. What do? We keep her for a while. She wouldn't even boot Kwame Kilpatrick out of the mayorship of Detroit. He finally just gets indicted and has to quit anyways. And so what do? We bring in Governor Snyder. Snyder fixes everything, forces Detroit into bankruptcy, which was a good thing because then Detroit had to got a free pass on some of their bills. They could reformulate. Quicken Loans, the CEO there, I forgot his name, Dan something, but he comes in, helps Detroit. They build up the downtown, and everything's going good. Yeah, we had the Flint riot crisis, not minimizing that. And Michigan foolishly goes and elects another female Democratic governor. What are we thinking? Okay, but right now, the media is in love with her. They're fawning over her. And so she may very well be Cuomo's running mate when it comes to this election. And it'll be a very exciting convention to watch. It may not even be a full-out convention because of the coronavirus. But when it comes out to it, I would say it's probably at least a 40% chance that Joe Biden will not be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And Cuomo will, and he may just very well pick Whitmer as a governor. That's all I got for today. We're coming up on a half hour. I try to keep this a half hour to an hour. Hopefully you enjoyed the very first Facebook Live broadcast. This will also be on YouTube. I will shoot out the link. If you are watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe. That way we can build up a following base. And by all means, if you want to be interviewed on this show and to debate me or just to talk shit, hey, give me a message and a way to get a hold of you, and we can arrange something. If you think I'm wrong on any topic, and we'll discuss a whole host of topics of the days coming up, then by all means, feel free to message me and we can debate as well. So, with that being said, thanks for watching my very first live broadcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, recorded broadcast, and I will hope to see you on Monday night at 9 p.m.